as you can see, it's about split between MSDB and file system, and there's about a quarter of our audience who isn't sure, so maybe they really haven't used deployment options for their SSIS packages yet. So this should be a good session.
All right. Excellent.
Okay, and are you ready for me to switch screens and make you presenter, Jose?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay, there you go. And as always, everyone, this session is recorded and will be available on our website by tomorrow. Enjoy your session.
Alrighty, so welcome everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Rachel. I hope everybody gets something out of this presentation, which is going to be just a brief presentation and what are the different SSIS package deployment strategies and which one, and I'll do a quick demo on a couple of them. So let's see if I can get this started. All right, so that's me. Some of you that know me already. I'm database administrator and also a business intelligence developer working for Pragmatic Works. And you can reach me through email, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And you can read some of my blogs at sqljoe.com and Business Intelligence Developer Network, BIDN.com as well. All right, so just going our agenda, we have only two main topics. One is the different SSIS deployment targets and the different SSIS package configuration options available in integration services. So the two targets, talking about the deployment targets, as most of you are aware, one of them is the file system. And a file system is basically deploying the package to either the default SSIS file system package store, where you can see the actual default path. If you install integration services with the default path, you'll see that for 64-bit and 32-bit, it's under your program files under Microsoft SQL Server 100 DTS packages. That is the default file system store. You can specify your own store, but this is typically where you're going to be deploying them. Then as a second option, you have the SSIS package store, which is basically the MSDB database in the current release of SQL Server 2008 R2. So this basically, you're deploying these packages and they're being stored as XML files inside your MSDB database. So I'm going to talk about that and I'm going to do a demo on them. So the second topic, SSIS package configurations. So for those of you who are not aware, you can make all your data source connection managers and several other properties of your SSIS packages dynamic using SSIS package configurations. And there are 5 different options how you can make them dynamic. One of them is the XML configuration file. You can also use an environment file. This is a server environment variable. You can also use registry entries. You can use parent package variables. And you can use the SQL Server store. Now, out of these 5, what you commonly see out there are the XML configuration file and the SQL Server. That's because they scale a little bit better and they're a lot simpler to implement than the other ones. Environment variables, I've seen a couple implementations, but that requires system admin rights and it's not favored by DBAs sometimes. Registry entry, I have never seen implementation done registry entry, and that's because a lot of people don't like to mess with the registry, and you can break things, of course, because of this. And it's a little bit harder to implement because you have to deploy all these changes to different registries throughout your different servers. And then the fourth one, the parent package variable, I have seen a couple of them, and it's basically passing all these configurations through parent packages, from one package to child packages. And that's a very common way of doing it. But typically you'll find the XML configuration file and SQL Server stores are the has the most adoption. All right, so moving on to my demo. I'm just going to showcase a couple. I'll just showcase the XML and the SQL Server deployment for now. And if I have time, I may show the environmental variable, but I want to keep this demo short. So what I have here is a simple project, integration services project, in which I have a data source and a destination. And I have one package that loads dim customer from my OLTP, AdventureWorks OLTP source to AdventureWorks data warehouse destination database. So if we take a look, open SSMS, connect to my local host, and span databases, you'll see that I have 4 databases here. And this is just to mock up what you'll see in your environment. Well, you have development databases. In this case, I have a source development database, and I have a source, a destination development data warehouse. So if we expand AdventureWorks Dev, I see that this is just a typical, OLTP database sample that Microsoft puts out. And in this one, I have my sales.customer, and I'm going to use that table to load my data warehouse dev, and I'm going to load that dim customer table. So it's a little bit more simplified view of my customers along with a customer data warehouse key. Once I load my package in dev, once it's QA'd, and I would like to move it to production. So the next step will be deploying the package. But if I deploy the package, most of the time, or it will be on a different server, and most of the time, these databases will be named differently. So in this example, my development databases have a _dev name, and my production databases have a _prod. So the trick here, or the goal is, once I deploy my load dim customer, it should automatically point to my prod databases instead of my dev databases, as they're doing now. If we take a look at my current project and I open the AW OLTP source, you'll see that it is pointing to my local host and to my AdventureWorks _dev. So that's my source table right now. If I open my destination data source, I see that it's pointing again to my local host and to my AdventureWorks DW _dev. So again, AdventureWorks dev and AdventureWorks DW dev. So if I run this package, you'll see that everything runs correctly. And I got 19,000 rows. And if you take a look at our DW prod dim customer table, we see that we have data loaded into it. So now that we have completed development of our package, we would like to deploy it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to enable configurations on this package. The way I do that is I go to SSIS, package configurations, or I can simply click on the white space here on the control flow again, right click on the white space and click on the package configurations. So by default, package configurations are turned off. So the first thing we need to do is to enable package configurations. Once I enable that, I click on the add button, follow the wizard, click next. And as you see, I have several options here. I have an XML configuration file, environment variable, registry entry, parent package variable, or SQL Server. So the first example, the first demo will be on XML configuration file. So what this will do is create an actual XML file that will hold the different values that I'm going to pass as I deploy my package. So once I choose XML configuration file, it's prompting me to point to the configuration file. So I'm going to click Browse, and I'm going to save that XML configuration file under my root drive, my C, and I have a folder here called SSIS config. So you see there's nothing there, it's blank, so I'm going to create one. It's going to, as soon as I give it a name, the new XML blank configuration file is going to be created. So I'm going to name this my SSIS config XML. I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to click Next. Once I click Next, if I go and browse my C drive and go to my SSIS config folder, I see that nothing has been created yet until I start populating that file. So I'm going to go back here, and the goal here, as I mentioned, is to make my source and destination connection managers dynamic. In this case, if I expand destination, expand properties, you see that there are several properties on my connection manager that I can make dynamic. One of them, or the first one that I'm interested in, is in the initial catalog. And the initial catalog is my actual database name. If I click on that, you see that automatically it reads what I have currently on my package, and that's the AdventureWorks DW dev. The second one I'm interested for now is my server name. So I'm going to check that. And right now my server name is pointing to my local host. And I want to do the same for my source, the connection manager. So in this case, again, my database name and my server name. There are several other properties that you might want to make dynamic. So for example, you could make the actual password dynamic, because passwords will, or most probably, and best practices say that they should be different in dev. So you may want to change the actual password and the actual username. But in this case, I'm running off of the same instance, so everything will be the same. But in most cases, you'll have your database, your server, your username, and password as the different dynamic properties you want to set. All right. So once I set those two different properties for my connection managers dynamic, I'll click Next, and I'll give this name. So it will be ds config, and this is just a name to group all the different properties I'm making dynamic on this configuration file. So I'm going to click Close, and I should see now a file. So as soon as I finish that wizard, I have a SSIS config XML. If you open this file, which can be browsed on your through Internet Explorer or through Notepad, it's just a plain text XML file. You see the different properties we have set for both our source and destination connections. All right, so I'm going to close that. And once I created my enabled and created my package configuration, I need to do one extra step, and that is to actually create the deployment files. So the next step will be right-clicking on my project here on top, and you see the difference. This is my solution, and this is my project. So I want to right-click on my SSIS deployments project, and I'm going to go to Properties. So there are several configurations here, and the one I'm interested in is under Deployment Utility. And under Deployment Utility, I see that there's a property here called Create Deployment Utility, and by default it is set to false. So in order to create deployment files, I need to make this true. Once I make that true, you see here that there's a default deployment output path. I can change that or leave it as default, and I'll show you where that is located in a minute. So again, create deployment utility needs to be set to true, and those files will be created under bin deployment. So where will those files be created? So if you click on your SSIS deployment project and you expand this a little bit to the left, you can see that under full path, you can see the actual path where my project resides. So right now it's under my documents, under Visual Studio 2008 projects, SSIS deployments, and if I go to that, browse to that folder, and I'm going to do that now. I'm going to open my Windows Explorer, go to Documents, Visual Studio 2008, Projects, Deployments, Bin Deployment. So you see, Bin Deployment will be under your current project path. So right now, I just enabled the files to be created. Let me expand this to the right. But I have not actually created the files. So what I need to do is build my project. So when I build my project, right-click on that project and click on Build, I'm going to see a little message here at the bottom that says Build succeeded. I can also open my output, and I can see that my build has been successful and one has succeeded. And I have no errors and nothing has been skipped. 0 errors, 0 warning. So everything has been successful. All right. Once I do that, if I go back to my project deployment folder, I see that several files has been created. So you can recognize this one, that SSIS config XML has been recreated in this folder. I have my package, the load dim customers, and I'll have another file called the SSIS deployments. If you expand the type, you see that this is a integration services deployment manifest. And this file is actually an executable. So what you'll typically do if you're a developer, you would build your project, you'll enable your configurations, and once you build your project, you will zip this folder, and you will hand it off to your database administrator so they can run this file on the new server, on the production server. So let's imagine that this is that I am the developer, and I just send this to the DBA, and now on the DBA receive these files in a shared folder, and I'm gonna open and actually deploy this package. So what I'm gonna do as a DBA on the production server is that I'm gonna double click on my deployment manifest. Once I do that, this package installation wizard comes up. I'll click next, and now I have the options. How do I want to deploy this package? So remember the two targets I talked about? So I have the file system deployment, and I have a SQL Server deployment. So for now, let's do a file system deployment, and I'll do SQL Server deployment next. So I'm going to choose file system deployment. I'm going to click next, and automatically you'll see that it gives us the path where this package is going to be deployed. Now, if you're in 64-bit, this wizard is like a 32-bit wizard, and it actually looks for the x86 installation. So that's fine if you're a 32-bit. Let me show that. That's fine if you have a 32-bit instance, but in my case, I have a 64-bit instance. So the actual default path is not that one. So I have to actually go to Browse, Computer, C Drive, and it's on my program files. This is my 64-bit version of all my programs, and that's where my SQL Server instance resides. So that will be program files, SQL Server, 100, DTS, and packages. So now I have the correct path where I want to deploy. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to click Next to finish. Now, as a DBA, I'm prompted to change the properties that I have specified. So in this case, I don't want it to point to prod, to dev. I actually want it to point to prod. So I'm going to change this to prod. And if this was a different server, I could specify the server name. So just for clarification purposes, I'm going to change this instead to my actual NetBIOS name. So this will be my server name. I'm going to deploy. So I have changed my destination database to prod and change also my source database to prod. And I specify the actual server name I want to deploy this. So now as a DBA, I change the configurations that are correct for the instance I'm deploying to. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to click Finish. All right. Once that is done, I can go to SSMS, and I'll connect to my integration services engine. You will see it's another option here. I want to connect to my integration services engine again, to that server I just deployed, And under stored packages, I should see under file system the actual file, the actual package that I deployed. So if I try to run this package under connection managers, you'll see that now my data source has changed to data source server name has changed to the actual server I specified and to the actual databases I specified. So for the destination, you see that AdventureWorks DW prod is now the destination database, and AdventureWorks underscore prod is my new source database. And it's pointing now to the server I specified. All right. Now, something to note here in the file system and the actual reason why you want to use the MSDB or SQL Server Store instead of file system is that with file system, you cannot specify the security model. So for instance, if I want to create I cannot create roles. If I try to create a role, which is a package role, I get this error. And it's telling you that you cannot specify roles for file system, for packages that are deployed on your file system. So you have to figure out a way to either encrypt where those packages reside, or do some type of Windows security on them. So that's the only issue with file system. Now under file system store, I already had this deployed because I've been testing, but now I can create a package role. And with package roles, you see that I have different package roles I can specify for read only, and I can specify a package role for write as well. So that's the added benefit of deploying to a SQL Server store. So I'm going to now simplify how to deploy to file system. I'm going to delete this. And you'll see that right now we don't have any file system, SQL Server deployed packages. So when I go back to my deployment, still using XML. So in this case, I'm going to use the SQL Server deployment option. I'll click Next. And the first thing it's going to ask is for our server name. So in this case, it will be my NetBIOS name. I can specify type of authentication. In this case, I'm going to use Windows Authentication to deploy. And I'm going to browse to where I'm going to save it. So when I click on Browse on this ellipsis to the right here, it's going to give me the actual structure that I have on my integration services server, similar to what I have here in SSMS. So this is my instance, and this is the MSDB structure I have right now. There are ways to create new folders if you want to be granular or more organized and have different folders for different type of packages. So you can create folders here, and you'll be able to see them in here as well. So in this case, I just want to deploy to my regular MSDB root database, no folders. And I have an option here so I can check if I want to rely on the server storage for encryption. And that's very important if you want to encrypt your packages. In this case, I'm not encrypting, so I'm not going to check that. So I'm going to click Next. And if there are dependencies, so do you have other like custom assemblies or other type of dependencies for your package, they will be deployed, but those will be deployed to your file system, and that will be to your default file store. And this is very important to note because if you are using a 64-bit, make sure that you are changing that to your 64-bit default file store and not to your 32-bit. So I'm going to click Next. In this case, Browse, and I don't have any dependencies, but just to exemplify that you have to make sure that if you have a 64-bit instance, you have to deploy to the 64-bit instance default package store, which is under DTS packages. Okay, click Next. Click Next, and again, we're gonna get prompted. What are the production databases I want to point these to? So in this case, again, prod and prod, and this should be my server name. I'll click next and finish. So now if I refresh, now I see my load dim customers has been deployed to my SQL Server Integration Services instance. If I do try to run it again, and I see my connection managers, I'll see that now that package is using the new settings I specified, my production databases and my production server name right here. All right, so that is my first demo, which is deploying packages using XML configuration files. So my next demo will be deploying the same package using a SQL Server Store, and I'll show that right now. Unless anybody has any question, I can answer a question to this portion right now. If not, we can save those questions.
We have some questions if you'd like, Jose. One question is from John, and he would like to know, he's had issues in the past with package developed on 32-bit and deployed on 64-bit. Is this usually an issue?
No, actually the contrary. Most of the issues you'll find are packages created in 64-bit and deploying to 32-bit. And there's one special consideration, and that is when you're dealing with Excel files. Excel, right now as of 2008 R2, the SSIS only supports Excel file destination and sources running under 32-bit mode. So even if they were creating 64-bit, and even if you had like Excel 2010 64-bit driver, it is not currently supported, and you have to run those packages in 32-bit. In Denali, that will be fixed, hopefully. That's the promise. And the Excel 2010 64-bit driver for SSIS is going to be supported. Hopefully, that's the promise. So that's the only consideration, the only issue I've seen, but I've not seen any issues regarding deploying 32-bit to 64-bit.
Okay, and we have another question. How does encryption work, and are there any caveats to remember? Yes,
so encryption, they all depend on keys. So that will be like a whole other webinar on talking about encryption. But you have to make sure that you are passing on the correct keys, or the correct keys, encryption keys are being applied. I can send, if you can send me an email, I can send you some articles regarding to encrypting SSIS packages. And that could be a good webinar I can make in the future. So that's a great question.
Okay. Another question is by Irene. She says, Jose, would you then use file system deployment only if you wanted to run the packages from a Windows scheduling job?
No. Well, yes. In that case, if you want to use like the DTS exec utility, which is a command line, and using Windows scheduling, yes, then that will be your best bet. Now, you can also use DTS exec even through the Windows scheduler and call packages that are deployed to under the integration services package store. So there's this utility called the DTS exec, where there's a GUI actually under SQL Server 2008 R2 and under execute package utility. So all the options that are available here on the user interface version of the DTS exec, you can pass on through a command line. So you can have a SQL Server and also a file system. This is a package store in a file system. So you can use it for Windows scheduling as well. It's just passing, instead of passing that it is a package that's stored on the file system, you just have a switch that says that's a SSIS store instead. So you can use both for Windows scheduling.
Okay, great. And she has a follow-up question as well. When deploying to MSDB, can you show how you deploy from source safe?
Good question. I don't have source safe installed. I have another version which is Visual SVN, uh, which I'm not sure if the version I have supports it. Unfortunately, I will have to create a demo for that. But yes, and that's a great point. You can deploy from your source control systems as well. You can package the package deployment through your source control. I don't have a demo that I can do right now. Yeah, I'll have to create one, and that could be also another good webinar. But if you want to email me, I can send you some articles I have using SourceSafe, Visual SVN, and also Team Foundation Server. So those are like the three main source control systems out there, and they support deployments.
Okay, great. Thanks for all the great webinar ideas, guys. You're making my life a lot easier. We have another question from John. Isn't another issue with file system packages the fact that it is not backed up within the MSDB database backup?
Yes, exactly. Great point. So there's some caveats or some benefits on deploying to file system and then deploying to MSDB. In most cases, MSDB is going to give you the best of all, because what's his name, sir? John?
John, yes.
Yeah, as John mentioned, the benefit of deploying to an MSDB file system, MSDB's integration services storage is that when you back up your databases and you back up your MSDB database, your packages are also being backed up. Also, you can rely on the security here for your package roles. So you can be more granular as a DBA. You can know who has access to read or to execute or to modify those packages. If you deploy to the file system, then you have to rely on your network admin and make sure that that C drive or that default file system package store is being backed up. And also the security is out of your realm, because now it's a Windows file share or Windows system file security that somebody else manages in most cases. So if you're a DBA and you want to have control of everything in your environment, then deploying to MSDB will be your best option.
Okay, we have a few more questions. Do you have time, or do you want to finish your presentation?
Let me finish the presentation, because I would just want to showcase SQL Server configurations.
Okay, great.
So, and all great questions. Let me go back, and I'll finish this real quick. So, the other option you have is to deploy using SQL Server configurations. And let me remove this and close and save. And let me remove this one, because that was part of my testing. And just so that everybody knows that I'm not cheating, I'm going to delete the packages I have deployed. So everything's clean. Nothing under my my arms. So if we can take a look at my database that I have here, I created a new database called the SSIS config database. And under that database, right now I have no tables. And when I go through the process of creating the SQL Server configuration, SSIS configurations, you'll see that a new table is created. And we'll talk about that once it's created. So again, I'm going to go to package configurations. I'm going to add a new configuration. And in this case, I'm going to choose SQL Server configuration. So the first piece of information that we need to provide is what is the connection? Where is this configuration going to be retrieved from? So I could use the existing destination or source connections, but in this case, I'm not saving them on either my source or my destination database. I am saving it on its own separate database. And this is the best practices. Have that isolated so that you can move that database to your different server environments. So if we go back to bids, I'm going to create a new connection. And it already sends that I created SSIS config. I'm going to delete it real quick. I'm going to create it new. And it's the same process as creating the other data sources. And I'm going to choose my SSIS config database. Test. I get connection. I click next. Okay. And now the second part here is create a table. In this case, I don't have any table created, so I'm going to actually have the wizard create a table for me. So I'm going to click new, and it gives me the actual SQL statement to create a table. And it's going to create a table called the DBO, under my DBO schema, called the SSIS configuration. And it has several columns that need to be populated. And these are the data types that we'll need. These are just text columns. So I'll click OK. And the next step will be create a configuration filter. This is just a name that will hold all the different properties. So in this case will be my ds underscore config, and I'm going to click next. And now you see it's very similar to my previous example. We're using XML configuration files. So I'm just going to expand destination, properties, again my initial catalog and my server name, and under my source, initial catalog and server name. I'm going to click next. And I just need to create the configuration name. So I'm just going to name it the same, ds config. ds standing for data source. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm going to click finish. Now that I've completed that, if I go to my SQL Server Management Studio and refresh this database, now I see the table that's been created for me. And that table is called the SSIS configurations, as we established, or as we specified in the wizard. If we expand this table, you see the different columns that have been created. And let's take a look at let's browse the file, what's created there. So by default, it's gonna copy what's on my package, what has been hard-coded in my package. And right now, it's been hard-coded my localhost server name and my VentureWorks dev databases. So what I'm going to do as a DBA, what you want to do is copy or script out this database or back it up and then restore it in your production environment. So let's just imagine that this is my production environment and I just restored this database, but this database still contains development information, dev environment info. So I'm going to do is I'm going to edit. I could go into T-SQL and do T-SQL updates, but I'm just going to choose to do it manually here. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the server name to the actual production server name. And I want to change the database names to my production database names. All right. So again, change my server names and change my production database names. Let's browse just to make sure. Okay, and I got everything perfect. So now when I deploy these packages, it's going to look for this SSIS config database under my local instance, and it's going to use the connection information here from these values. So let's go back to bids and let's just overview what we did. So we created a connection, which you see now right here at the bottom. It's part of your package. And you can make that dynamic as well. You can do that through an environmental variable. But in this case, we can just specify, like if you have a default instance, then it will grab the default instance in this case. And it's going to look for that database, the SSIS config database, right here. And inside your database, it's going to look for a table called SSIS configurations. So when we deploy it, is going to change the actual server name and database names to the appropriate production environments. I'm going to cancel this, I'm going to close. And now I'm going to save this and build it. So build has succeeded. So I'm going to go back to my SSIS deployment, which is right here. And I'm going to click on my deployment manifest. Click next. Then I'm going to do it to my SQL Server deployment. I can. This is a very important step to option to check. Validate the packages after installation. Make sure that they're not corrupted. Make sure that they can read your file configurations. I'm going to click next. And in this case, I want to specify my new server name and where in my SSIS store I want to save that package. So it'll be in the root of my SSIS package store. Now click next. If I have assemblies, again, I will have to change this to make sure that if you're 64-bit, change that to your 64-bit path. I'll click next. Click next. And everything has been deployed. Now in this case, I was not prompted to change any of the configurations because everything's stored in my table, and it will read from that table and apply it automatically without having me to specify it. Click next and finish. If we go back to our integration services instance and let's refresh, now you see that my package has been deployed under my SDB database. And if I try to run this, under connection managers, you see that now it has read from that table and grabbed the actual production database names as well as my server names, which was specified in this SSIS config table. So it's exactly the same as I specified. So from a deployment perspective, SQL Server configurations are great because you can scale, and it's easily for DBAs to just do restores or do like a PowerShell script and deploy this database with all the configurations to the appropriate server with appropriate server names and appropriate database names. So matter of fact, some great guys out there in the SQL community has put out like PowerShell scripts that will cycle through a list of server names and database names, and it will actually create this database and populate this SQL Server database and SQL Server table with the appropriate server name and the appropriate database name on each of the different servers. So it's a really nice way to quickly deploy packages. It is also easy to maintain. Instead of maintaining XML files, you just have to maintain now a table that you're familiar how to create update statements or just manually change them. So my preference are SQL Server configurations just like this. They're easier to deploy, easier to maintain, and they can scale a lot better. And again, as a DBA, you have control on the security, who has access to read and to write to this table. And if anything breaks, it can easily be recreated by having a backup of this table. Alrighty, so that concludes my demo for today. There are other configuration options, like I mentioned, that we wouldn't have time in an hour to just go through each one of them. I just want to point out environment variable. Environment variable, basically you have to create a system variable. I have one created here. In this case, I created one for my destination database and one for my source database. And in that environment variable, what I just did is I went to my local computer under Properties, Advanced System Settings, and you have here an Environmental Variables button. I click on that button, and as you can see here on my System Variable section, and that's key, System Variables, not user variables, because these are specific to the local user that's logged into the computer, and you don't want to set that there. You want to set that in your system variables section. So in this section I have those two variables I created, destination DB and source DB, and I'm just giving the actual database names that are going to be used for this server. So the only issue with this type of configuration is that you have, on each server, you have to manually create these environmental variables and set the actual names of the database. There's also like PowerShell scripts where you can create this and deploy different environmental variables to different instances. But if you're a DBA, usually you will not have the right access to create environmental variables on a Windows server. This is typically a network admin guide. So just wanted to point out how to create the environmental variables and how to create them. And this will be by changing this to instead of XML to an environmental variable, and then specifying the actual variable they're going to use. In this case, destination DB. And the same, you can set what are the properties that you're going to change here. In this case, it's the initial catalog. So if you see here, we don't have a multi-select because each environmental variable will stand in for a specific property. So you have to create one for the initial catalog, or for, in this case, the database name, one for your server name, one for your password, and one for your username if you're changing all of them. So that's why typically environmental variables are not used, because it needs one environmental variable per property, and also requires elevated security or elevated administrative rights on your server. So typically SQL Server configurations and XML configurations are the preferred method of deploying packages. But again, this will vary depending on your environment. Alrighty, so that concludes my demo. If there are any other questions, I can.
Yep, we do have some more questions.
Answer them right now.
Okay.
All right.
Ashish wants to know, when he moves a package from one computer to another, do I need to create an environment variables that point to my configuration files?
Yes.
Okay.
So is that, say again, I'm sorry. So is that a yes or no question, or was?
It's when I move a package from one computer to another, does he need to create environment variables that point to his configuration files?
Yes, yes,
yes.
Exactly. So you have to create these on each server. Yes, yes.
Okay. We have another question. How do you address the destination for the package to MSDB subfolder?
Oh, okay, that's simple. So let's say if we go back to my SQL Server Integration Services instance, I can create a new folder here, and let's say my folder. So now it's a folder under my MySDB, and when you deploy, and let's see, where's my deployment? Here it is. When you deploy, next, select SQL Server Deployment. In this case, my local host, and I browse my package path. Now I see my folder here. So it's just a matter of selecting the folder, clicking next, 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 finish, and I should see that package under my folder. So there is. So this one is under the MFTB, and now this one is under my folder. So it's just a matter of creating it here, and in your deployment path, drilling down to that folder that you created.
Okay, great. So we have another question. Is there any version control on SQL or file system deployment?
Yes. Actually, most, if not all of your source control systems, you can actually add files that reside on your file system as part of your source control environment. So yes, you can also use source control on specific files on your shared drives on your current server.
Okay, great. What kind of monitoring can be set up for packages?
Monitoring. Oh, awesome, awesome. So a little plug. We develop several products here in Pragmatic Works that actually will help you do that. We have with BI Express, we have a SSIS monitoring console. We have an auditing framework, and some other products that will log everything that happened to each of your instances or your package, the last runtime, any errors that were logged, um, all that kind of monitoring. You can also do the native type of monitoring. And typically, when you deploy these packages, you'll create a job. Let's say, I have an execute packages here already, and I have a master package that I'm calling. So when this executes, I can actually monitor the history or see the history. In this case, has been failing because, yeah, probably that file doesn't exist anymore. I have to delete it. So you can do some basic monitoring from here, see what happened, but this is after the fact. Unless you're doing job activity monitor, and you can see what's happening currently on the running packages. So you have these options from SQL Server Agent where you can monitor and see what happened on your packages as they were executed. But you can also take advantage of our tools which come with the BI Express, and you can add auditing and monitor, see the history of all your packages when they were run. Oh, actually, and we also have a notification framework I forgot to mention, which will automatically send you email messages or log to a Windows event, any errors or anything that you want to be notified about when those packages run. So you have several options here, and probably the Pragmatic Work tools will give you a good flexibility on what you want to do. Little plug, but
Yeah, that was good.
we're proud of it.
We are proud. We've worked hard to cultivate them. So Darwin would like to know if it's easy enough, could you demonstrate how to use the BI Express deployment wizard?
The BI Express deployment wizard, yeah, it's very easy. So once you have it installed, you have an option here where you can deploy the whole solution or deploy a specific package. So let's deploy only the package for now. So you click on deploy SSIS package with using BI Express. It's going to launch this wizard. I click next, and you have several options. If it exists, prompt or overwrite or skip if it exists. If you have checkpoints enabled, you can specify the location. And then if you have the configuration files, you can have the same options here, override, skip, prompt. I'm going to leave those at default. So click next, and I can specify here where I want to grab those packages from. So in this case, if I have like a file system package, and in this case, it's already recognizing that I have a couple of packages here from my solution, and that I have selected my load dim customer package. This is my source. This is where my package is coming from on this side. And now on my target, I'm going to specify where I want it to save. So I'm going from my file system, and I can go to file system as well. I can go to SQL Server or SSIS package store. So in this case, let me deploy from my file system to my SSIS package store. There is a little bug that's going to be fixed, that when you change the target, you have to specify your server. So in this case, that will be my server. Click reconnect, and I can see my MSDB and actually all the folders under my FDB. So once I specify, click on what specific folder I want to deploy, and I have highlighted which packages. I can multi-select several packages, or I can choose one. Select what folder I want on my destination, click on deploy. And it's telling me that it already exists, and if I want to override. So I'll say yes. All right. I have a password enabled on my package, so I am going to put a password. Okay. And it's going to give me a summary of what I did and it's telling me that I have successfully deployed this package to my MSDB my folder. I can see the log if I want to save the log. And I can close. And that's it. Simple as that. Finish.
Great.
So you don't have to do copy paste. You don't have to do go to the deployment wizard. You simply right click on the package and click on deploy. Select how it's going to behave. You want to override any other credentials you want to set. Select from where you're going to deploy the packages, and select to where you're going to deploy the package to, and deploy, next, and finish. Four to 5 steps, and you're done.
That's great. Okay, Lillian wants to know the difference between MSDB and SSIS store.
So the MSDB, well, let's see. So it's basically, when we're talking about integration services, you're talking about your MSDB, your storage location. And that is what's known as your SQL storage, which is really your MSDB database. And then when you're talking about your integration services or your server store, you're talking about your default file system store, in this case, the path that I gave you in my slide, which is this one for 64-bit and this for 32-bit. So you have your SQL Server store, your MSDB database, and your file system store in your actual underlying storage.
Okay. Natalia has a question. My package has variables which will be changing with every execution. Is there a way to include them in the SSIS configuration?
Say that word again. What's happening with the packages?
Her packages has variables which will be changing with every execution. Is there a way to include them as in SSIS configuration?
Yes, absolutely. So if we go back to the package and we go to my package configurations, I can edit the configuration. I can go back to my properties, and you can see here that you have also variables. In this case, I don't have variables enabled. Let me enable a quick one right now. So with my variables, and let me add a variable. So this will be my var, and go back to package configurations, edit, next, click next, and there's a section here where I can see my variables. So there's a top level here, and now you see that my var. So you can change the actual properties, the actual values of the variable. You can change the name. You can change namespace, the actual expression, if it's evaluated as an expression, or the actual hard-coded value. So let's say in one environment your value is 1, and in another environment your value could be 5. So you can specify this here. So let's enable that. Next, finish, close. If I go back to my SSIS config database, I should see that variable here. So this is my variable, my var, and I can set the actual value here. So I could set a 5 if you want to hard code that. So yes, you can use variables or change the variable values through SSIS configurations.
Okay, great. We have a few more questions. TSAP would like to know, how do we move DTS packages on earlier versions to SQL Server 2008 R2? What would you recommend?
Interesting question. Well, there's two options, the hard way or the easy way. Which one do you want? So everybody will want the easy way, right? So the hard way, just to give you an idea, you have an option here under SS packages where you can migrate DTS 2000 packages. Or you can just bring in an existing package or import an existing package, and this will be like your 2005 SSIS packages, and SQL Server or integration services will do its best to upgrade them. Unfortunately, that doesn't always go well. There are some limitations to this native package upgrade. So I'll give you a little plug about our products, and I think I have it installed here. There you go, DTX Exchange. So your best bet, not only because I work for PromatiWorks, but because I've done this for customers, and we have upgraded hundreds of packages. I upgraded once almost 100 packages in less than an hour. So if you want to do it manually, painfully, you can do one by one, and it will take you years. Or you can use our DTS Exchange program, and it will actually tell you, you can actually go from DTS 2000 to 2005 or to 2008 or 2008 R2, and it will tell you what portions of your package can be upgraded without any further interaction or manual settings. Or it will tell you a couple tasks that have been deprecated and are not supported. Most of the ones you're going to see are the script tasks. So now the only manual thing you have to do is to convert that old script task to in an ActiveX task to the new task in 2008 and 2002, which is the script task component. So those are the only two things that you will need to do. And there are some frequently asked questions on other things to consider, but DTX Exchange will give you the best flexibility to upgrade packages.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Jose, for taking time to answer our questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I know we didn't get to everyone's question, but feel free to email Jose. I think he put up a slide with his email address and blog and Twitter, so feel free to message him on any of those mediums. And thank you, Jose, for teaching such a wonderful session.
Yep, thank you, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Be sure to join us for more free training on the cheese.